that's when I said to her, "Gender? I hardly know her." Not just a joke to start the video, actually. I'm one of those secret third option genders, which means I don't really fit the idea of the gender binary. I usually say that I'm either non-binary or transmasc, as I think those are the labels that people understand that would explain who I am most. I see myself as if someone that was like both a man and a woman mixed with someone that was like a man, but not quite. So there's no real word to explain what I am, and I'm okay with that. I see it as something very similar to Judith Butler's idea of gender as something we perform and a social construct. I think the idea is true that if there's no proper way to perform being a woman or a man, that what I'm doing is seen as valid as a form of masculinity, even if others don't exactly see it as so. I dress like it's the 80s, it seems. I have a lot of makeup on right now, but I still go by he, they pronouns and expect that everybody can get that from me. But that's not how it is. A lot of people see me, an AFAB, so assigned female at birth person, wearing makeup and colorful outfits and just assume that's a girl, which isn't exactly true. I base a lot of the way I look on some specific celebrity men, or I see celebrity men from things I like, and I just assume they're performing masculinity the way that I do as well. And so it feels validating for me to see this, especially when it's people that are doing some form of nonconformity, which we'll get to, but it's not something that everybody understands when looking at me. But before I get too far onto who the gender envy men are and what it is I get gender envy about, I should probably explain to you what gender envy is.
I wanna live like common people.
So what is gender envy? Well, according to pflag.org, it refers to a casual term primarily used by transgender people to describe an individual they aspire to be like. It often refers to having envy for an individual's expression of gender, for example, wanting the physical features, voice, mannerism, style, etc. of a specific gender. Gender envy is sometimes experienced by people expressing themselves outside of society's gender stereotypes. So, in my case, I have two ways that I would define how gender envy works for me. Option one is that I see somebody that doesn't have things that I have to worry about with my own dysphoria. Like, for example, I have to wear a binder right now, because if I don't, I'll probably freak out about my chest. Just a silly little thing about being me. But sometimes it makes it so that when I see tall, lanky men, I get a little bit of gender envy about the fact that it's not something they have to worry about. The other form of the way I see gender envy is when there is a person performing masculinity the same way that I believe I do. Like, if I see a man being kind of non-conforming, I would go, oh, gender envy, you're just like me in a way. Even if it's a slightly different form of this performance, there's still an envy there. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself yet again, because maybe I should explain to you guys first who the guys are that I get gender envy from. Alright, welcome to the section where we're going to be on my floor. We're going to be going through the corkboard of celebrity men I get gender envy from. So before I get into it, just a heads up, I'm going to be talking about traits that are masculine or feminine. I don't necessarily believe in those, as I've said with the understanding of gender as something you perform, but since most of society still does. So, right here to start, we have John Linnell of They Might Be Giants. So he isn't exactly the idea of masculinity, I find. He's tall and skinny and an accordion player in a geek rock band. So I don't think that's society's idea of peak masculinity, but I think that it's kind of the idea that somebody can be a man, and a cis man, and valid at being a man, without fitting society's ideas of manhood and all that, and there's something that I really envy there, because I have a hard time believing, no matter how much I get close to passing, that I will ever be seen as much as valid of a man as some cis men that are just given being a cis man that makes them get a pass. So next we have Jarvis Cocker of Pulp. So for him, I think what it is, he wore a lot of makeup in like the 90s when they were doing their original run, Pulp. And so that's already like a form of nonconformity that I do that as well. He also would dress in fairly flamboyant ways, which again, I have a calling towards. So I see his performance of masculinity to be not exactly the same as mine, but like in a very similar vein. There's still going to be things with all these people where it's like they don't need to worry about things like wearing a binder that I get a little gender envy about, but it's more so with him that it's just like, you're doing what I'm doing, but it's okay when you do it. and it's making me not really a man when I do it. We have Will Wood, a singer-songwriter. So in the first picture we have here, it's Will cross-dressing. He looks very androgynous, which is something that I would like to confuse people with the way I look. Similar thing here with the other picture. A little bit more like you can tell it's a man in makeup. He has such a way of doing makeup that's a little bit odd, a little bit different. So it's nonconformity with a twist, which I quite like. He was one of the main style icons I had when I first came out as non-binary years ago, and I based a lot of the way that I present on him. Then here we have David Bowie. I feel like this one doesn't need any kind of explanation. Cross-dressing. Dressing is something I wouldn't even associate with a gender at all, too. You know, the Ziggy Stardust era was full of being an alien, so there's just a level of being above the idea of gender that I quite like. There's just also general nonconformity, makeup, and extravagant flamboyant outfits. Big fan. And then we have Peter Capaldi in Lair of the White Worm as Angus Flint. For him, what it is that I see a lot of similarities in the way we look. Curly, fluffy, brown hair, the glasses. A lot of my same points with John Linnell stand here. It's not like there's any kind of nonconformity going on there. It's just not what you associate with the idea of a masculine man. I could also say he wears a kilt through a lot of the movie, which not only makes me happy as someone with Scottish heritage, but also, you know, it's a skirt kind of, so that's pretty cool for nonconformity, I guess. Then we have Jeffrey Combs as Herbert West in Reanimator. So I wouldn't say this one is a looks-based one. It is more an attitude thing. He holds himself in a way that he's very sure of who he is. He's very sure of being right and the ideas we associate with masculinity at all times. A lot of people actually headcanon him to be trans-masc for the reasons of being short and having to be so sure of how masculine he is at all times, and it's just an attitude that I wish I could have about things sometimes. Here we have Peter Murphy, singer of Bauhaus. So for him, I see he looks quite similar to David Bowie, so a lot of those points still stand. It's kind of just a goth twist on it. With him though, the makeup is a little bit different sometimes, a little less extravagant in ways, but there's still just, you look like you could be a man or a woman. I don't know, and I just really would like to hold the level of androgyny there. But again, I think I perform a very similar form of masculinity to him. Here we have, lastly, David Tennant. So first we have here him as Crowley. For Crowley, I would just say fairly flamboyant, not really fitting the ideas of masculinity. And I just like the flamboyancy and being a little bit different. I relate to that. Then we have here him as the 10th Doctor, which it's kind of the idea, again, of how masculinity works. Because he's not someone that looks like our typical idea of masculinity. He plays a character that is seen as the hero, a position that is usually by a masculine man in things, like a superhero per se. But instead of it being a superhero, it's just this tall, skinny Scottish man. And there's something about having that and being seen as a hero and like a man that I get envious of, because there's the level of not looking like that idea but being seen as one that is there. So now the question is, what does this say about me? What do they have in common? What does this make about my identity? So we have the idea of androgyny. If somebody looks a little bit like you can't tell what pronoun to use, it's probably something I get gender envy from, or just general nonconformity. You see a man wearing makeup, I probably get gender envy. You see a man wearing a skirt, I probably get gender envy. The idea generally is that if somebody doesn't quite fit the gender codes that our society has set up for men, I probably get gender envy from them. So here's the thing then. Gender codes. What's that? Well,
I cut down trees, I wear high heels, suspenders, and a bra.
So I brought up an idea of a code of gender. So what exactly is that? A code of gender is kind of another word for a gender stereotype or a gender norm. An idea of a specific way you're supposed to dress and act. So basically, there's a correct way to perform your gender. This is a very binary view to start with. It's very focused on there's a way to be a man and a way to be a woman. So this already leaves out all of us secret third gender option people. I'm more on the masculine side. There are things that affect me. As I've mentioned, androgyny is a thing that I am interested in. But in the documentary Codes of Gender, it is said that androgyny is something that makes us uncomfortable. The idea here is that because we can't exactly tell somebody's gender up front, we don't exactly know how to interact with this person. I think it's a weird look. It exactly is the binary. If somebody's outside of the binary, we don't know how to act, which is just, again, making the binary stronger. And it states the idea that people like David Bowie from the Corkboard are supposed to make us uncomfortable in a way, because we can't exactly tell at times what that person is. It's a weird look when my existence is being not part of the gender binary, and I try to look like not part of the gender binary. The idea of my existence within itself is a thing of uncomfortability. It's also said in the documentary that if a man is non-conforming, that's something that makes us uncomfortable. The idea of a man doing something we associate with women should make us uncomfortable and fretful, almost, which is, again, a very strange look to me. It associates, yet again, a bunch of the people from the Corkboard, and even myself, with the idea of something being wrong and something to be uncomfortable about with us. It feels weird to be one of the people that are associated with something wrong, but I think I know what the point is here being made. The idea is masculinity is seen as the norm. It makes it so women seem to be allowed to be non-conforming more than men are. And this isn't me saying women have it easy. Women have a lot of things that aren't easy in their lives. But it seems like because we see masculinity as a gender-neutral thing or just the normal thing, we don't think of anything that much when a woman does something that's not conforming. For an example, women can wear pants, but if a man wears a skirt, it's highly questioned more so. So the idea here is, why would somebody who's a man, the thing we see as normal and good, decide to do something that's not manly, something we associate with women? Because, they see it as inferior, so it's a form of misogyny. And I think another important part here is that we don't think about the cis men who are doing the being androgynous thing, or the cis men doing the non-conformity thing, as any less cis. Sure, we seem to think they're weird based on the ideas of society. Sometimes it'll lead to the belief of them being gay, which is also rooted in some form of misogyny, but we don't think of them as not men because of it. But it affects trans people and trans-masc people in a way that's, this person must be faking it. So, what all is there about the codes of gender and trans people? Am I pretty enough to lie to? So, the trans elephant in the room. It seems like in our culture with the binary, the idea for a trans person, or at least a binary trans person, is that you have to be hyper whatever gender you are to be seen as valid. So if you're a trans man, you need to be hyper masculine, or if a trans woman, you have to be hyper feminine. There's no real in between, and it's based on the idea of passing. The idea of passing is basically being seen as a cis person and truly seen as a woman or seen as a man based on our idea of what a woman and man is based on biology stuff. Yeah. As I've said, secret third gender option. That's me. So I don't know where I fit already. It seems like the codes of gender aren't quite made for me in an extent, which is true, but it feels weird to not have a guidance on how I'm supposed to truly be. The most of a guidance that I seem to have are the men that I showed as my gender envy guys. Now the thing is, we already went through how being not conforming is something that allegedly makes us uncomfortable. So adding the whole being trans thing to that isn't exactly great. It's very strange for me to battle it out with this to an extent. I'm somebody who, as I said, was born a woman, and I don't really identify as that, but I certainly still present myself in a feminine way, but I am some form of man. And it feels weird when I'm already something that would be accepted as okay, but because I use he, they pronouns and am trans-masc of some form, it becomes weird, and it makes my existence an uncomfortable thing. Looking like this, asking people to say that I'm a man, not really something they like to do. And even if I passed, it wouldn't be great. That's the thing. Even if I looked, like, identical to Will Wood, even if I looked identical to Peter Murphy, and I was still asking for people to call me a man like I was, the idea is that I'm still going to make people uncomfortable, and my identity is still weird in a way, which shows there's no winning even if I passed properly as a cis person. Even if I didn't go for the nonconformity route, like let's say I wanted to look like Angus Flint exactly, or John Linnell exactly, it's still not the kind of masculinity that is allowed for a trans man. It's not hyper-masculine, so they're not going to see it as valid. It's a weird thought to have, that someone can look at me and be like, not good enough, fake. And it's the way that it works. And the fact that I'm not a man or a woman already makes it harder, because what are they supposed to think of me? I'm a thing that isn't in a lot of people's brains. I'm a thing outside of the binary, so what am I supposed to do? It's hard to come to a proper conclusion here, though, because all I've really said is there's no winning for me as a trans man or trans man adjacent thing who wants to look feminine. Where do we conclude this? It seems like the one thing that stayed a constant is the idea of a gender binary being harmful. The idea of a correct and an incorrect way of performing something is very strange. So, subscribing to the idea of performativity that I do, that Judith Butler said, explains to me an idea of a gender spectrum. If there's no one way to perform something, there has to be many ways, and a spectrum of ways to perform different things. I think that if we all just kind of agree on this more, or at least understand that there's a range of how even cis people perform genders, that we'll have a lot more ease of explaining that third gender people exist, or that trans people are valid in the way that they perform. It's not like it's something that's going to come quick and easy. We live in a society that's still based on this idea of the binary, and it's going to take time, but I think the best we can do is ourselves understand this, that gender is a construct, and we decided there would be two. And if we can decide there won't be, even just for ourselves, and try to push the ideas for others, we can make a fix to a lot of things. It'll make it so a lot of people feel like they can fit in better. It'll make it so the idea is nonconformity and is just seen as someone doing what feels best for them. If it's true that it makes us uncomfortable to see a man being nonconforming, what is it about it that does that? It shouldn't. We should just see it and be like, that's not how I would present, and that's okay. And have the decency to understand that they are who they are, and that's okay. And we're not going to understand everything about the way that people are. It's all that the binary sets up. And the binary sets up that nonconformity weird. So, I guess the real conclusion here is gender binary dumb.